Have you ever had someone destroy your livelihood on camera and then blame you for it in front of thousands of people? I never thought a Tuesday morning at my favorite coffee shop would cost me almost $3,000 and nearly destroy my entire career, but here we are. And I need to tell you this story because what happened was so insane that even now, 6 months later, I still can't quite believe it. My name is Adrian Cooper. I'm 31 years old, and I work as a freelance graphic designer. When I say work, I mean I live and die by my deadlines, my reputation, and my ability to deliver exceptional creative work to clients who are paying me good money to make their brands look incredible. That particular Tuesday in March, I had the biggest presentation of my year due at 4:30 in the afternoon, a complete brand identity package for a tech startup that was pitching to investors that same evening. The client was paying me $6,800 for this project, and I had been working on revisions until 2 in the morning the night before, perfecting every detail, every color gradient, every font choice. I had set up camp at the Riverside Coffee House at 8 in the morning, my usual spot when I needed to focus. This wasn't just any coffee shop for me, it was practically my office. I had a 4-person table near the window, my MacBook Pro spread out in the center, my Wacom tablet to the left, my notebook and color swatches to the right, and my phone charging beside my half-empty iced coffee. The table wasn't huge, but I needed the space because I was working across multiple devices, constantly switching between my laptop for the main design work and my tablet for sketching refinements. Now, I know what some people think about remote workers taking up space in coffee shops, and I get it, I really do. But here's the thing, I had been a regular at Riverside for 3 years, I bought coffee every hour and a half like clockwork, I tipped well, and I knew Marcus, the manager, by name. We talked about his kids, his wife's bakery business, the new espresso machine they had installed last month. On slow days, Marcus would even sit with me for a few minutes and look at whatever I was working on. He had specifically told me multiple times that as long as I kept buying drinks and wasn't rude to other customers, I could work there as long as I needed. The staff knew me, they knew my order, and they knew I was respectful of the space. That morning had been perfect, honestly. The coffee shop was quiet until about 10, then it started filling up with the usual late morning crowd, people grabbing coffee before heading to offices, students with laptops working on assignments, a few elderly couples reading newspapers. I was deep in my work, making the final adjustments to a logo animation sequence that needed to be absolutely flawless. My client, Daniel Foster, was presenting to a group of venture capitalists who were known for being extremely picky about branding and visual identity. If this presentation went well, Daniel had already told me he would bring me on for 3 more projects, potentially worth another $20,000 in work. If it went poorly, well, I didn't want to think about that. By noon, I had been there for 4 hours, and I was making incredible progress. The animation was flowing beautifully, the color palette was cohesive across all materials, and I was actually feeling confident that I would finish with time to spare. I had grabbed my 4th coffee around 11:45, a large iced vanilla latte, and I was sipping it while fine-tuning the kerning on a headline when I noticed a small crowd gathering near the door. There were 4 people, 3 women and 1 man, and they were clearly together, talking loudly, laughing, looking around the coffee shop like they were scouting locations. One of them, a woman with perfectly styled blonde hair, oversized sunglasses pushed up on her head, and an outfit that probably cost more than my monthly rent, was holding a ring light and talking into her phone. I didn't think much of it at first, social media people were everywhere these days, but then I noticed they kept looking in my direction, specifically at my table. The blonde woman walked over, her phone still in her hand, her 2 female friends trailing behind her while the man started setting up what looked like camera equipment near the counter. She stopped right at my table, looked down at my laptop and materials spread out, then looked at me with this expression that I can only describe as confused disdain. "Excuse me," she said, her voice bright and a little too loud, "are you using this whole table by yourself?" I looked up, a little startled because I had been completely absorbed in my work. "Yeah," I said, "I'm working on a project, sorry." She glanced at her friends, then back at me, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. "It's just that this is like a 4-person table, and there are 4 of us who need to sit down. The place is pretty packed." I glanced around the coffee shop. She was right, it was busy, definitely the lunch rush, but there were still a few empty 2-person tables along the wall, and I could see at least one other 4-person table with only 2 people sitting at it. I felt a flutter of anxiety in my chest, but I tried to keep my voice polite and reasonable. I understand, I said, but I've been here since 8 this morning working on a deadline, and I really need the space for my equipment. There are a few other tables open if you look around. Her expression changed, just slightly, from friendly confusion to something harder. She tilted her head, and I noticed she was angling her phone toward me, the camera definitely pointed in my direction. Since 8, she repeated, so you've been hogging this table for like, what, 4.5 hours during the busiest time of day? I'm not hogging it, I said, trying to keep my tone even. I'm a regular here, I buy coffee consistently, and I'm working. The manager knows me. Oh, you're a regular, she said, her voice dripping with sarcasm, so that means you get to take up a whole table while paying customers can't find seats. That's really considerate. One of her friends, a shorter woman with dark hair pulled into a sleek ponytail, leaned in and whispered something to the blonde woman, who nodded and then did something with her phone, tapping the screen a few times. I felt my stomach drop because I suddenly realized what was happening. She was recording this, or about to start streaming, and I was about to become content. Look, I said, my hands instinctively moving to cover my laptop screen. I have a really important deadline in a few hours. I can't move all my stuff, and I need this space. I'm sorry, but I was here first, and I'm working. The blonde woman laughed, actually laughed, and held her phone up higher. Guys, she said, clearly talking to her phone screen, her followers, this is exactly what I was talking about in my last video. Entitled remote workers who treat coffee shops like their personal offices and then get mad when actual paying customers need seats. I am a paying customer, I said, my voice a little louder than I intended. I've bought 4 coffees this morning. She ignored me completely, still talking to her phone. This guy has been here since 8. It's now 12:30, and he's got his whole setup spread across a table for 4 people during lunch rush. Like, this is a public space, not your bedroom, buddy. I felt my face getting hot, a mixture of embarrassment and anger bubbling up. I looked around, hoping to catch Marcus's eye, but he was behind the counter dealing with a line of customers. The blonde woman's friends were now filming too, their phones pointed at me from different angles, and I suddenly felt trapped, exposed, like I was the villain in some story I didn't agree to be part of. What's your name? I asked, my voice tight. She smiled, a big, bright, influencer smile. I'm Josie Warren, she said, like I should know who she was. I have 47,000 followers across platforms, and I'm really passionate about coffee shop etiquette and public space awareness. Okay, Josie, I said, trying to sound calm even though my heart was racing. I respect what you're doing, but I'm asking you to find another table. I have a work deadline that cannot be moved, and I've been set up here all morning. There are other seats available. She stepped closer to my table, her ring light now in her hand, and I noticed the man who had been setting up equipment was walking over with a tripod. Are you seriously refusing to share this table? She said, her voice incredulous, like I had just admitted to kicking puppies. I'm not refusing to share, I said. I'm saying I need this table because I'm working and I have equipment that requires space. You can see there are other tables. Not 4-person tables, she shot back. We need space for our equipment too, we're creating content. Then find another location, I said, and I heard how harsh it sounded the moment it left my mouth. But I was frustrated and scared because this situation was spiraling and I could feel my carefully planned day slipping away from me. Josie's eyes lit up, like I had just given her exactly what she wanted. Oh wow, she said to her phone, did you guys hear that? Just find another location, like he owns this place. This is the entitlement I'm talking about. Her friend with the ponytail, who I later learned was named Scarlett Hayes, set a large tote bag down on the edge of my table, deliberately crowding my space. Josie was now full on live streaming. I could see the comments rolling across her screen, little hearts and messages popping up. She was narrating the whole thing, painting me as this horrible person who was selfishly taking up space and refusing to accommodate other customers. I'm going to get the manager, I said, standing up from my chair, and that's when everything went wrong. As I stood, Josie shifted her position, ostensibly to get a better angle with her ring light. She was moving the light stand, a tall metal pole with a circular LED light on top, and she swung it around in what looked like a careless motion. I saw it happening in slow motion, the base of the stand knocking against the edge of my table, the table wobbling, and then my iced coffee, my large 20-ounce iced vanilla latte that was 3/4 full, tipping over directly onto my MacBook Pro. The liquid hit the keyboard and immediately started seeping into the device, dark brown coffee spreading across the silver aluminum, dripping between the keys. I lunged forward, my hands grabbing the laptop and tilting it sideways to let the liquid drain out, but I knew it was already too late. My screen flickered, then went black. My stomach dropped so fast I thought I might actually be sick. "Oh my God," Josie said, her voice high and alarmed, but I noticed she didn't move to help, didn't grab napkins, didn't apologize, "You just lunged at me." "What?" I said, my hands shaking as I held my now dead laptop. "I didn't lunge at you, you knocked over my coffee." "I did not," she said loudly. "You stood up aggressively and knocked your own coffee over when you lunged toward me." Her friends were nodding, backing her up, their phones still recording. "That's not what happened," I said, my voice cracking because I was on the verge of panic. My laptop was dead, completely unresponsive, and my entire presentation, all my work, every file I needed, was on that laptop. I had a backup, but it was from 6 hours ago, before I had made all the critical revisions that Daniel specifically requested. 6 hours of work, gone. Josie stepped back, putting distance between us, and I realized she was still live streaming. "You guys saw that, right?" she said to her phone. "He literally came at me when I was just trying to set up our equipment. I think he's trying to blame me for his coffee spilling." "You knocked the table," I said, my voice louder now. People around us starting to stare. "You knocked it with your ring light." "I barely touched the table," she said, her tone defensive but also triumphant, like she was winning some game I didn't know we were playing. "You're the one who jumped up and caused this whole scene." Marcus finally appeared, pushing through the small crowd that had gathered. "What's going on here?" he asked, his eyes moving between me and Josie. I tried to explain, my words tumbling over each other, about my deadline, about being there since morning, about Josie demanding my table and then knocking over my coffee. Josie interrupted constantly, talking about how I was hogging space, how I had refused to share, how I had aggressively stood up and lunged at her. Her friends corroborated her story, all of them nodding and showing Marcus their phone screens like they had evidence. Marcus looked overwhelmed, caught between a regular customer he knew and a group of people with cameras and social media platforms. "Let me check the security footage," he said finally, which made my heart lift with hope because surely the cameras would show what really happened. But then his face fell. "The system is showing an error," he said. "I can't access the footage right now. I'll have to call our tech support, but it might take a few hours." "A few hours," I repeated, feeling desperate. "I need to know what happened right now. My laptop is destroyed." "I'm really sorry, Adrian," Marcus said, and I could tell he genuinely was, "but without the footage, I can't make a determination about what happened. I think you all need to just move to different areas of the shop and calm down." Josie was already packing up her equipment, her friends flanking her protectively. "We're leaving," she announced loudly. "We don't feel safe here with someone who acts violently over a coffee spill." She looked directly at her phone camera. "Note to my followers, avoid Riverside Coffee House if you value your safety." I watched them walk out, still filming, and I felt completely helpless. I sat back down at my table, staring at my ruined laptop, coffee still dripping off the edges onto the floor. I tried turning it on again, pressing the power button over and over, but nothing happened. It was dead. I pulled out my phone with shaking hands and called my friend Oliver Bennett, who worked in data recovery and IT support. He answered on the second ring, and I explained everything in a rush, my voice barely holding together. "Bring it to me right now," Oliver said. "If the liquid shorted something critical, I might not be able to save anything, but if we act fast, there's a chance. Don't try to turn it on again, just bring it straight here." I packed up my stuff in a daze, my hands still trembling, and drove to Oliver's office across town. The whole way there, I was doing calculations in my head. The MacBook itself was worth $2,400, and I didn't have insurance that covered accidental damage. The lost work hours, the potential lost contract, the domino effect if I couldn't deliver this presentation, it was catastrophic. Oliver met me at his office door, took the laptop from my hands, and immediately started working. He carefully opened it up, used specialized tools to disconnect the battery, and started examining the internal components. I watched him work, my stomach in knots, thinking about Daniel expecting his files in less than 4 hours. "It's bad," Oliver said after about 20 minutes. "The liquid got into the logic board." I can try to clean it and see if I can get it to boot, but even if I do, there's no guarantee the hard drive is readable. I have to get those files, I said, my voice barely a whisper. I have to finish this project. Oliver worked for 2 more hours, and I paced his tiny office the entire time, checking my phone every 30 seconds, watching the deadline creep closer. At 2:15, Oliver finally got the laptop to power on, but the screen flickered and showed error messages. At 2:45, he managed to access the hard drive and started pulling files. I got about 80%, he said, looking at me with sympathy. The most recent revisions are here, but there are some corrupted files. You're going to have to work fast. I pulled out my backup laptop, an older model I kept for emergencies, and Oliver transferred everything he could recover. I opened the project files, my heart sinking as I realized several key files were corrupted or missing entirely, but the core work was there. I had the main logo files, most of the brand guidelines, the color palettes. I worked in Oliver's office for the next hour and a half, recreating what I could from memory, improvising where files were completely lost. And by 4:15 I had something that was maybe 75% of what I had originally created. It wasn't perfect, not even close to the polished presentation I had spent weeks developing, but it was functional. I emailed everything to Daniel at 4:28, 2 minutes before the deadline, with a brief explanation that I had experienced a technical emergency but had recovered most of the work. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely type. Daniel called me 10 minutes later. "Adrian," he said, his voice strained, "what happened to the files? Some of these look different from what we discussed." I explained everything, the coffee shop incident, the destroyed laptop, the data recovery process. Daniel was silent for a long moment. "Okay," he said finally, "I'm presenting in 3 hours, so I'll work with what you sent. We'll talk about this later." He hung up, and I sat there in Oliver's office feeling completely defeated. I had narrowly avoided complete disaster, but I knew the work I delivered wasn't my best, and I had no idea if Daniel would ever hire me again. Oliver put a hand on my shoulder. "You need to do something about that woman," he said. "What she did was deliberate property destruction. You need to file a police report." "But I don't have proof," I said. "The security footage wasn't working." "Then get proof," Oliver said. "There were a dozen people in that coffee shop with phones. Someone must have recorded something." I drove home that evening feeling numb, exhausted, and angry. I kept replaying the incident in my mind, the way Josie had positioned herself, the way she swung that ring light, the way she immediately started accusing me of lunging at her. The more I thought about it, the more deliberate it seemed, but without evidence, it was my word against hers and her 3 friends. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept checking my phone, waiting for Daniel to email or call with feedback about his presentation. At 11:30, my phone finally buzzed with a message from him. "Presentation went okay. Investors were interested but had questions about some of the branding inconsistencies. We'll need to do another round of revisions. Let's talk tomorrow about timeline and cost adjustments." Cost adjustments, that was code for he wasn't going to pay me the full amount because the work wasn't up to standard. I felt sick. The next morning, I went back to Riverside Coffee House. Marcus was there, and he pulled me aside immediately. "Adrian, I'm so sorry about yesterday," he said. "I finally got the security system working late last night, and I pulled the footage from your incident." My heart jumped. "What does it show?" I asked. Marcus looked uncomfortable. "That's the thing, the footage is really weird. It shows the woman and her group approaching your table, and it shows the coffee spilling, but right before that happened, I noticed something strange. That guy who was with them, he was walking around the shop earlier, and it looks like he was specifically checking the camera angles. He stood in different spots and looked up at the cameras like he was mapping them out." "Why would he do that?" I asked, although I was starting to have a horrible suspicion. "I don't know," Marcus said, "but then when the actual spill happened, the woman with the ring light positioned herself in a way that made it hard for the camera to see exactly what happened. The angle is just wrong enough that I can't definitively say she knocked the table on purpose, but it also doesn't look accidental." "Can I see the footage?" I asked. Marcus hesitated. "I'm supposed to keep it for insurance purposes, but let me make you a copy. I think you might need it." He burned the footage to a USB drive and handed it to me. I went home and watched it over and over, studying every frame. Marcus was right. the man, who I later learned was Nathan Reed, Josie's assistant, had definitely been scoping out the cameras. He walked around the coffee shop at 11:53, about 5 minutes before Josie approached my table, and he looked up at each camera, moving to different positions, clearly noting the blind spots and angles. Then, when Josie approached my table, she positioned herself precisely in a spot where her body blocked the camera's view of the ring light stand and the table edge. When she swung the ring light, it looked almost natural from the camera angle, like it could have been an accident, but watching it multiple times, I could see the deliberate arc of her movement. I needed more evidence though, so I started digging into Josie's social media. Her Instagram was public, 47,000 followers like she had said, mostly lifestyle content, coffee shop aesthetics, fashion posts, motivational quotes. I scrolled through her recent posts and found the video from the day before, posted about 2 hours after the incident at Riverside. The video was titled Coffee Shop Confrontation, Public Spaces Aren't Your Office, and it had already gotten 12,000 views. I watched it, feeling my blood pressure rise with every second. The video was heavily edited, starting with her approaching my table and asking to sit down. It showed me saying find another location in a tone that sounded harsh and dismissive. It showed me standing up quickly, the coffee spilling, and her backing away with her hands up defensively. The editing was clever, it made me look aggressive and unreasonable, and it completely left out the part where she swung the ring light. The comments were brutal, hundreds of people calling me entitled, selfish, a terrible person. Several comments said things like remote workers are the worst and people like this ruin coffee shops for everyone. I reported the video to Instagram for containing false information, but I knew that wouldn't do anything. Then I had an idea, a long shot, but worth trying. Instagram, like most social media platforms, keeps server cache data of videos, including sometimes the unedited uploads. I had a friend, Luca Martinez, who worked in social media analytics and had access to some back-end tools. I called Luca and explained the situation, asked if there was any way to access the original video file that Josie uploaded before she edited it. Luca was skeptical but said he would try. 2 days later, Luca called me back. "You're not going to believe this," he said. "I found the raw upload in the cache, and dude, she deleted about 40 seconds of footage from the beginning." "What was in those 40 seconds?" I asked, my heart pounding. "Right before she approaches your table, she turns to her friends and says, 'Watch this,' and then she talks about how she's going to make content out of confronting you. Then, right before the spill, you can hear her say under her breath, 'Make it look natural.'" I felt vindicated and furious at the same time. "Can you send me that footage?" I asked. "Already done," Lucas said. "Check your email." I also documented the metadata showing this was the original upload before editing. This is pretty damning evidence that she planned the whole thing. I spent the next few hours planning my next moves. I filed a police report for destruction of property, bringing the security footage from the coffee shop and the recovered Instagram video. The officer who took my report seemed skeptical at first, but after watching both videos, her expression changed. "This does look premeditated," she said. "I'll forward this to our detectives. They'll want to interview the involved parties." I also filed a small claims court case against Josie Warren for the cost of the laptop, the lost work hours calculated at my hourly rate, and court fees. The total came to $4,100. But the thing that really changed everything happened 3 days after the incident, completely without my involvement. A regular customer at Riverside, an older man named Theodore Walsh, who I had seen there dozens of times but never spoken to, posted a video to Reddit. The post was titled "Influencer Deliberately Destroys Freelancer's Laptop After Failed Coffee Shop Confrontation," context included, and it had been posted in the General City subreddit and several other communities. Theodore had filmed the entire interaction from his seat across the coffee shop, and his angle captured everything the security cameras missed. His video clearly showed Josie scoping out my table before approaching, showed Nathan checking the cameras, showed the entire conversation where I politely asked him to find another table, and most importantly, showed the moment Josie deliberately swung the ring light stand into my table with enough force to make it wobble and knock over my coffee. The video also had audio, and you could hear Josie immediately start accusing me of lunging at her, even though the video clearly showed I had simply stood up and reached for my laptop after the spill. Theodore's post included a long caption explaining that Josie had done similar confrontations at Riverside 3 other times in the past few months, always targeting solo workers with expensive equipment, always filming for content, and always causing some kind of scene. He wrote that the staff was afraid to ban her because she threatened to post negative reviews, and that he was tired of watching her bully people for social media engagement. The post exploded, absolutely exploded. Within 24 hours, it had over 100,000 upvotes. Within 48 hours, it was at 200,000. By the end of the week, it had reached 340,000 upvotes and had been shared across Twitter, TikTok, Facebook, and multiple news sites. The comments were overwhelmingly supportive of me and critical of Josie. People found her social media accounts and started posting the Reddit video in her comments. Her followers started dropping rapidly. Within a week, she had gone from 47,000 followers to 31,000. Within 2 weeks, she was down to 19,000. Then her sponsors started dropping her. She had been sponsored by a coffee brand, a clothing company, and a phone accessories company, and all three publicly announced they were ending their partnerships with her due to behavior that didn't align with their brand values. Josie tried to fight back, posting a long video explaining her side of the story, claiming the Reddit video was taken out of context, claiming I had been harassing her, claiming Theodore was lying. But the evidence was overwhelming, and every attempt she made to defend herself just made things worse. People found the cached version of her original Instagram video with the "Watch This" comment and started sharing that too. The police investigation moved forward, and detectives interviewed Josie, Nathan, and the 2 other friends who had been with her. Under questioning, Nathan apparently admitted that Josie had asked him to check the camera angles because she wanted to make content and needed to know where to position herself. He claimed he didn't know she was planning to knock over my coffee, but his testimony about the camera reconnaissance was enough to establish premeditation. The coffee shop manager, Marcus, officially filed a complaint for destruction of property and banned Josie from the premises. 2 other coffee shops in the area saw the viral video and preemptively banned her as well. My small claims court case was scheduled for 6 weeks after the incident. By that point, the story had been covered by multiple news outlets, and Josie was facing significant public backlash. Her follower count had dropped to 12,000, most of her sponsored content had been deleted from her accounts, and she was essentially persona non grata in the local coffee shop scene. The court hearing was straightforward. I presented the security footage, the recovered Instagram video with metadata, Theodore's video from Reddit, Oliver's invoice for the data recovery work, and my laptop repair estimate which stated the device was beyond economical repair and needed replacement. I also presented documentation of my lost work hours and the impact on my client relationship with Daniel. Josie's lawyer tried to argue that the spill was accidental, that I had contributed to the incident by refusing to share the table, and that my damages were exaggerated. But the evidence was overwhelming, especially the cached Instagram video where she said make it look natural right before the spill. The judge ruled in my favor completely, awarding me $4,100, the full amount I had requested. Josie was also ordered to pay additional court costs. I wish I could say that was the end of it, but the aftermath continued for weeks. Daniel, my client, eventually paid me the full amount for the project after his investors decided to move forward with funding despite the branding inconsistencies. He told me he had seen the viral video and understood what I had been dealing with, and he actually hired me for 2 of the 3 follow-up projects he had mentioned, worth about $13,000. Oliver refused to charge me for the data recovery work, saying that helping me was worth it just to see justice served. I insisted on paying him something, and we compromised on half his normal rate. Theodore, the Reddit user who posted the video, became a minor local celebrity, and we actually met for coffee a few weeks later. He told me he had been documenting Josie's behavior for months because he was tired of watching her harass people, and my incident was the final straw that made him decide to post publicly. The most surprising aftermath was how many people reached out to me with their own stories about Josie. I received over 50 messages from people who said she had confronted them in coffee shops, restaurants, stores, always filming, always trying to create confrontational content for engagement. Several of them said she had damaged their property, stolen their seats, or harassed them until they left establishments. As for my laptop, I used the court settlement money to buy a new MacBook Pro, this time with insurance that covered accidental damage. I also bought a waterproof keyboard cover and started keeping my coffee in a closed container instead of open cups. I still work at Riverside Coffee House regularly, and Marcus still greets me by name. The staff tells me that after the viral video, they implemented a new policy about filming customers without consent, and they're much more willing to intervene when people are causing disruptions for social media content. Josie's social media presence never recovered. Last I checked, about 3 months ago, she had around 9,000 followers, and her posts get maybe a few dozen likes. She deleted most of her old content, including anything related to coffee shops, and seemed to be trying to rebrand as a wellness influencer, but the damage to her reputation was permanent. Looking back on the whole experience, I learned several important lessons. First, always have current backups of critical work files stored in multiple locations. Second, document everything when you're involved in a confrontation, because you never know what evidence you might need later. Third, the internet can be both a weapon and a shield. It destroyed Josie's carefully curated influencer image, but it also vindicated me when I had no other way to prove what really happened. I also learned that there are good people in the world, people like Theodore who will stand up and speak out when they see injustice, even when it doesn't directly affect them. His decision to post that video changed everything for me, turned me from the villain in Josie's narrative into someone who had been genuinely wronged. The whole incident cost me weeks of stress, almost cost me my career, and definitely cost me some faith in human decency, but in the end, justice was served. Josie faced real consequences for her deliberate actions, I was compensated for my losses, and hopefully, she learned that treating people as content without regard for their humanity has real-world repercussions. I sometimes wonder if she ever thinks about that day, if she regrets swinging that ring light stand, if she wishes she had just found another table and left me alone. I'll never know, and honestly, I don't care anymore. I got my justice, I got my money, and most importantly, I finished my client's project and maintained my professional reputation. The coffee shop laptop seat war, as Theodore titled his Reddit post, is over, and I won, not because I'm more powerful or more influential, but because the truth eventually came out, and people recognized what had really happened. That's the kind of justice I can live with, the kind that restores balance and holds people accountable for their actions. And you know what the best part is? I'm still working from coffee shops, still spreading my materials across tables, still meeting deadlines, and still tipping well. Because that's my right as a paying customer, and no influencer with a ring light and a persecution complex is going to take that away from me.